All right, let's talk about a word you hear all the time in business: strategy. But what does it actually mean? Is it some huge, complicated 100-page document, or is it something different? Well, we're going to break it down. So, to kick things off, let's just start with a simple question: how do you fight a giant? Now, in business, this isn't some fairy tale, right? It's the daily reality for smaller companies going up against the titans of their industry. Do you just go head to head, or do you try something a little more creative? For example, check this out. A few years back, Burger King ran this wild promotion for Halloween. Now, at first glance, it just seems like a silly marketing stunt, right? But what if I told you this was a genuine, stone-cold act of corporate strategy? Could dressing up like your rival's mascot actually be a serious business move? The answer is a huge, resounding yes. Because, sometimes strategy isn't about some grand 5-year plan. Sometimes it's just a really, really clever ploy. This move by Burger King was a classic strategic ploy. It was a specific, surgical strike designed to do one thing, and one thing only: to poke fun at and directly outsmart its biggest competitor. The one with the famous clown. It was disruptive, it got a ton of attention, and it was aimed right at the heart of their rival. But a ploy, as cool as it is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. To really get the full picture, we've got to turn to the work of this brilliant Canadian management scientist, Henry Mintzberg. He gave us an amazing framework for looking at all the different faces of strategy. Mintzberg came up with what he called the 5 Ps of strategy. Now, we've already met ploy, so let's meet the other 4: plan, pattern, position, and perspective. Together, these things give us a really powerful toolkit to understand how basically any organization tries to compete and win. First up is plan. And honestly, this is the one we all think of first, right? This is the traditional view of strategy: a detailed roadmap all laid out in advance with a super clear purpose. It's the company's blueprint for the future. Next, we've got pattern. Now, this is about looking at what a company actually does, not just what it says it's going to do. A strategy can just emerge from a consistent stream of actions over time, even if nobody ever wrote it down on a formal plan. It's all about consistency in behavior. Then we have position. This is all about finding your unique spot in the market. It's about answering that big question: where can we compete and actually win? The whole goal here is to lock down a place where the company has a real, lasting advantage over its rivals. And finally, and this one might be the most profound, there's perspective. This isn't just a move or a spot on the board. This is a company's fundamental character. It's the shared mindset, that unique way of seeing the world that's baked right into the company's culture. And wow, this example just says it all. Back in the mid-90s, most people looked at the internet and saw a communication tool, for email and stuff. But Jeff Bezos, he looked at the very same thing and saw a global sales channel. That unique perspective wasn't just a plan. It was a whole worldview that gave birth to Amazon, one of the biggest companies on the planet. So we've got these 5 different ways to look at strategy. But what happens when one of those brilliant plans smacks right into the messy, unpredictable real world? Because really, the story of pretty much every business is the story of that very collision. And to understand it, we need 3 more key ideas: intended, emergent, and realized strategies. The intended strategy is pretty much what it sounds like. It's the original plan, and the perfect example is FedEx. When Frederick Smith was just a college student, he wrote a business plan for this radical new delivery system using a central hub. That school project was the intended strategy that became the foundation for the entire company. But then, life happens. Reality hits. And that's where emergent strategy comes in. While the intended strategy is all about being proactive and deliberate, an emergent strategy is reactive. It's an unplanned move you make because of some unexpected challenge or maybe a sudden opportunity. It's all about thinking on your feet. Now, sometimes these emergent moves can be a total disaster. Back in the 80s, FedEx saw the fax machine taking off and kind of freaked out. So they made an unplanned pivot and created Zapmail, a service to electronically send documents between FedEx offices. It was a huge leap from their core business. And it failed hard. The system was unreliable, customers were furious, and the whole project just became a financial black hole. Zapmail is the classic cautionary tale about an emergent strategy that goes horribly wrong, usually because it strays way too far from what the company's actually good at. But hold on, it's not always a horror story. Sometimes
An unplanned, emergent strategy doesn't lead to disaster. Sometimes it leads to incredible, world-changing success. And the story of Avon Cosmetics is the perfect example.
To get this guy, David McConnell, his intended strategy was to be a successful author, selling his books door to door. But as a little sales gimmick, he started giving away a free perfume sample. Well, the books were a total flop, but people absolutely loved the perfume. So he made a quick, reactive, emergent move. He ditched the books and started a perfume company. And that company became the giant we know today as Avon.
So what does all of this really mean? When you put the plans, the reactions, the big wins, and the epic fails all together, what do you actually get? You get the realized strategy. This is the strategy the company actually follows in the real world. And it's almost always a hybrid. It's a mix of the parts of the original plan that worked, blended with all the unplanned, emergent moves the company made along the way. So for David McConnell, that intended strategy of being a writer became what we call a non-realized strategy. It just didn't happen. But that little emergent strategy of selling perfume, that became Avon's billion-dollar realized strategy. It wasn't the plan, but it sure was the reality. And that really leaves us with a final thought. The next time you look at a really successful company, ask yourself this. Are you seeing the result of a perfectly executed, genius long-term plan? Or are you seeing the result of brilliant, opportunistic adaptation to a world that nobody could have possibly predicted? Most of the time, the answer is a little bit of both.